Welcome back to part 2 of our Block Racer game tutorial in Godot using C#. So, last time I encouraged you to consider a few different things, to make a few different objects of different sizes, give them different materials. And then we also asked some questions about if you were making a bowling game, what types of objects would you use for various parts of the bowling game. So for the ground, I would probably use a static body 3D. For the pins, I would use a kinematic body, or a rigid body 3D. And for the ball, I would use a character body 3D. All right, so now we are going to go to kind of a different topic. We're not going to focus so much on Godot or C# or anything like that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to actually design the game. So here we are in Visio. I'm just going to go to a blank drawing, create. So we're going to use a state machine diagram, a very sort of simple, not too in-depth or not too formally rigid state diagram. But we're going to use that concept to design our game. So this tutorial is inspired by a Brackeys tutorial. Brackeys did a Unity tutorial on a game that this game is going to be heavily influenced by. And the idea is going to be that you are in control of a block, much like the block we show here. And the game itself is going to just, accelerate you forward up to a maximum speed. And you're just going to race sort of down a predefined track, and there's going to be a series of obstacles that you have to dodge either to the left, to the right, or jumping over. And we can do some other things like pits, and we can do kind of whatever you want. But that's going to be the idea, is that you race down this predefined track, there's a series of obstacles, and then there's a goal. And once you get to the goal, you transition to the next level. And if you reach the last level, we're going to keep track of how many times the player dies, how many times the player runs into an obstacle or falls off the edge into a pit. And then at the end, we're going to display how many times the character died, and we'll give credits. So let's talk. So let's start with a state, and this is just going to be our start state. So start. And what are we going to do here? Well, we are going to initialize our initialize world counter or level counter, whatever we want to call that, to 0 to 0. Initialize death counter to 0. And then that's kind of it. Like that's probably all we really need. Initialize the game. And then let's see, we're gonna display start screen. And that's kind of it. So that's what we're gonna do in this first state. So from there, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have some play button. So we will go on play button pressed. And we're going to go to this next state, which is play level world counter. And that's kind of it. So it's gonna, what are we gonna do in there? Well, going to load level world counter, and then play the level. Play the level. Okay, so now there's basically two things that can happen from here. The player can crash into an obstacle, so, or fall into a pit. Player, so death screen. And we'll go there to there. We'll say, so player dies. So then we're going to have the ability for the player to restart. So wait for restart or quit. So we're just going to, let's leave out quit for right now. Let's actually put it over here. So we're going to put a quit state. And this is just going to kind of be a lambda transition. If you're familiar with state transition diagrams, basically the idea is from any state we can enter here and we can say quit button or key. So we're just going to make that its own state kind of off here. And from any state, it doesn't matter which one, it can transition to the quit state. Then, if we say the player dies, and then to kind of separate, we're going to say on restart, E pressed. So, the player dies, it goes to the death screen. And then if the player presses the restart button, which I'm just going to say, let's say you have to press the jump button, then it'll transition back. So we've got kind of two transitions. I'm just going to represent it with a single arrow, because again, we're not being too formal. Or over here, we're going to say, we're going to say load next level. So I'm going to go connector from there. I'm going to say that's another great connector. And it's another bidirectional one. Basically, all we're going to have to do is go so world counter plus plus. So we're going to say player wins, reaches goal, and then world counter less than max level. So what this is saying is, oops, so what this is saying is if the player reaches the goal, we transition to this state. And then if the world counter is less than the max level, in this state, we're going to say world counter plus plus. Oh, and that's the other thing. So we have to say death counter plus plus on there. So world counter plus plus, if the if the current world counter is less than the max level, then we load the next level and play the next level. Otherwise, we're going to have credits. And in the credits, we're going to show credits and let player play again. Oh yeah, show death counter. Let player play again. And so for this, I'm going to have another connector there. We're going to say world counter equals max level. Then we can say either we can go to the quit state, or if we restart, equals 0. or 1. Yeah, I'm going to use 1 to signify our world counter. And now we can do it this way. Yeah, let's do it that way. Okay. So now all we need to do is add 1 more transition from here to here. And say, play again, pressed. And there we go. Add an arrow. So by going through this little exercise, we can see kind of what we need to actually implement and what we need to actually do once we make our game, or as we're making our game. So we need to have some initialization stuff, and we see that we've got some counters that we're going to have to keep track of, and we'll talk about that in a future video. Then we're going to have a bunch of levels, and we don't really say in here where we initialize this max level, but we'll do that later. We just know that we're going to have some concept of a max level. So we're going to have some series of levels, and that'll kind of be up to you to make as many as you want. If the player dies, we show some, hey, you died. We increment our death counter, and then we wait for the player to restart. If the player wins, we load the next level and go back, and we just keep doing this until the player reaches the last level, or until they quit. And then if they do get to the last level, we're going to show the credits for the game. That gets to be where you show off your name and you say, hey, I made this game, look at this is cool. And we're going to show the death counter and then let them play again so that they can, try again and maybe get, get that death counter down to 0. So, I think that's all for this video. This is a pretty simple design document, but it's a good exercise to go through for any game you're doing something. Then this isn't necessarily needed, but if you're going to make a full game, it's good to go through this exercise, and you might not do it right at the start. It might sort of evolve, and it's, good to have this on hand, and as the design of the game changes, take a look at this and update it, and think about, well, if I add this other feature, what needs to change in all these other states? What do I have to do to make it so that I can add that? And so that's actually going to be an exercise for you for next time. If you wanted to add a warp state, such as in Super Mario Brothers, where you can warp to a different level, if you were to have like some area where it allowed you to warp, how would you update this design document? What would you do? As another example, think about a very simple game like Block Breaker or Pac-Man, something that's very simple, and do this on your own for that game. Make the design document. How does it work? What are the different states that that game is in? How do you transition between each of those states? So do that on your own just to kind of reinforce this process for yourself. It's a good exercise to go through for existing games, and then that way when it's time for you to make your own, you'll already know the process. So thanks for watching. Next time we're actually going to get started on implementing this in Godot and using C#. Thanks, and have a good one.